Life can be really hard, right? Growing up in a cult can make it even more difficult. How do you escape a cult? Once you escape, what do you do? How do you change your life? Do you grow? Do you not grow? What do you do? Like, there's so many different questions to be had related to people who grow up in a cult and escape. I'm excited to introduce to you the author of Glory, Going All In, Martha Kartaoui. We're going to be back in just a second where we're going to talk about how she went from cult survivor to a courageous warrior. Stick around. You are definitely going to want to tune in for this one. Hi, all. My name is Linda Sunshine West. I'm the founder and CEO of Action Takers Publishing. I'm so excited about this particular topic because cult life is something that's fascinated me for many, many years. There's so many different famous cults that we hear about, but there are also a lot of cults that we have never heard about. They're underlying, they're there, we just don't know about them. But Martha Kartaoui is the author, the #1 international best-selling author of Glory, Going All In, Cult Survivor to Courageous Warrior. You can get your copy at letgloryshine.com. Let me put that on the screen there, letgloryshine.com. We're going to be talking to Martha about her experience. Now, we're not going to spend all of our time talking about the cult. We're going to talk about what Martha is doing today, how she escaped that cult, and how she has completely transformed her life. Before we get started, please go ahead and like us and follow us. We're Action Takers Publishing on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Head on over there and subscribe to YouTube and follow us on the other platforms. Martha, I'm so excited to have you here today because we've had some really great conversations. I've read your book many, many times, and your story really fascinates me, mostly about the escaping part. But let's go to just a kind of a snippet of what it was like growing up in a cult, and then we're going to come to the part of escaping and then what you're doing today. So go ahead and share with us. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Linda. And I am so excited to be on this platform with you. This experience publishing with you and with Action Takers was nothing short of amazing. So thank you for all of the work that you did to make this book a reality. I'm so grateful for every time that you touch this book and how you've touched me in the process. So yes, to circle back to your question, growing up in a cult, being born in a cult, and being in that environment for 25 years obviously shapes us, creates who we are. And you don't realize how detrimental and how soul crushing it is until you make the decision to leave or escape. Because it was all I knew, and you only know what you know until you find out that, it's something else. So when I finally made the decision to make my escape, I was lost. I didn't know how to navigate this outside world. It was scary. It was unknown. And I faced many, many, many challenges because of that.
Were there a lot of people who kind of knew that you were in a cult or not? I mean, do you know?
So there's a lot of speculation, right? And when you hear the word cult, because I didn't know anything about a cult, we would have said, we're not a cult, because that was our life. There was such a negative connotation around that. And that wasn't a word widely used in the 90s when I was growing up. So I had no concept of what a cult was or that we were indeed a cult. If you would ask my biological grandparents or my biological extended family, they would absolutely say we were in a cult. But from the outside, like friends or people that we met in school, they would not have associated me with a cult. They would have just said that I am part of something that makes me dress very modestly and I can't cut my hair and don't wear jewelry and things like that. But I don't think that they ever suspected I was in a cult.
Right. Or they didn't know what was going on inside of that cult with you, especially, because there are different ranges of who experienced what within your cult, and you experienced some really harsh situations. We're going to talk just a little bit about that. But there was something you mentioned. You mentioned making the decision, right? The decision. This is something that we all experience in life every second of every day. We're making a decision of which way to go, which way to turn, what time to get up out of bed, what to wear. Like, there's decisions being made all day, every single day. And so for you, making that decision to leave, first of all, share that you left twice. So let's talk about the first time you made the decision to leave. What was that process like mentally? Is like, how did you get to that point that you were like, you know what? This isn't right. There's something wrong here. Or did you even get to that point? What made you decide to leave that first time?
So the first time, no, I wish that I could say that I was so intuitive that I was like, something's wrong here. No, I was just rebellious and I was tired of the physical abuse. And so I just wanted a different life selfishly for myself. Like I hadn't come to some epiphany about about the back asswardness of the cult or of the leader. I just wanted freedom. I wanted a different life because it was soul crushing is all how badly. And I ended up being, drugged back. So and I love how you talk about the decision is in everything we do. I say it's a choice. And I say that over and over in my book, that everything is a choice. And when we make a choice, we then have to live with the consequences. So by the time I made the escape on the second time, I actually had something to live for. And that gave me a different kind of energy and gave me a different kind of purpose than I had on the first time that I escaped. I made the decision and the choice in that moment that I will never go back, come hell or high water. Like, I had finally come to a point where I was like, no, I'm never going back. Again, I had not had the big aha moment. I had not had the big epiphany, but I had something to live for. And that was my sister was pregnant. And I wanted to be there for her pregnancy. And I wanted to be there for when my niece was born. And my sister and I had been separated for many years because of the cult, because she was no longer part of it. And I had found her on the internet. You'll read the whole story in my book, but that gave me purpose. That was something that I could live for. So it wasn't necessarily me. It was something that I could live for, though. It gave me something that I didn't have in my own strength.
Purpose is a huge driving factor, because when you left the first time, there was escape. Like, I want freedom. Like, that was the goal. Is like, I want something different. I want freedom, and that freedom wasn't a strong enough reason. Like the why, like they say, what's your why, which I've heard stands for what hurts you. Yep. And so if your why isn't strong enough, maybe freedom for you wasn't strong enough to not go back. Right. That freedom wasn't a driving force that moved you forward. I know, Les Brown, he says, you got to be hungry. And that hunger that we're striving for is purpose.
Right.
And so you now had a purpose, something to go toward instead of something to escape from.
Yes.
And so that kept you, and like you said, come hell or high water, and you have never gone back since that time. No. And your life is completely transformed. Can you share with us, like in your book, you talk about a few of the situations that occurred while you were there. And one I want to really speak to, because this really shows how great a cult leader is at hiding the truth. And that was one of your situations. Like, there are many things that happened. You got to read her book to find out all the different stories. But one of those situations was where you were practically starved to death. So I want you to speak about that, because you had family who didn't know what was going on. Well, this was going on right underneath their eyes, their nose, and they didn't know it because they were left out of the loop. It wasn't because they were dumb or ignorant or they weren't, avoiding it. It's that it was under their noses, but they couldn't see it. If I understanding, that's how I read the chapter, at least,
Yeah.
So why don't you speak to that a little bit about the that's one of the many abusive situations, but speak to that one, because that one really hit me hard. Like, how come her parents aren't helping her? And I found out later why, but so can you speak to that part right there?
Absolutely. And that is exactly what you said. That is the cult leader had carefully orchestrated and created this fear-based system within the cult where you never questioned anything that he said or did or proclaimed or prophesied, because it was coming from God. It was coming from the divine. He was the intercessor. So I grew up never questioning. Everybody in the group never questioned. They just accepted whatever it was, because that must be for our highest good, because it's coming from God, right? So this is just an example how he used God to control and to keep us all in this space of fear. And yes, it was happening under all of their noses, right? Every time, even though I lived in the compound, everybody came every weekend and saw me getting smaller and smaller and weaker, and not a single person questioned him and said, what's really going on? Is Martha okay? Like, nobody would have thought to even ask that. That was not even a probability, possibility. That wasn't a thing. And so, my parents didn't see me for months after they dropped me off. But when they came back after 4.5 months, and saw me, I could see the horror on their face, but they still didn't say anything. They still didn't say even anything to me, but because it was so ingrained in us that you don't ask questions. You don't ask, you don't accuse him of something, right? Because I must be the one that's bad. I must be the one that made this situation the way that it is. They would never blame something on Cult Man. So it was just the power that he held over us, and how he stayed so fibrously intertwined in our every being, in our every decision, in our every moment, that nobody questioned. And that allowed him to be sat on this proverbial pedestal of God, right? And when you're in that space, nobody questions you, because why would you?
Wow. It's just to think about, first of all, how one person can have so much power over us as human beings. I've been in not that exact type of situation, but I myself at age 52 joined what I didn't know was a business cult. And I became under the power of the leader. And, to admit it, I was embarrassed at the beginning, but, here's the thing is this happens. And you were born into that. You were born, you were the first child born into that particular cult, that environment, correct? You were the first child born?
No, I was the second child in my family born into it. Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay. So the second child in your family born into it, your parents made a conscious decision to join, not knowing that it was a cult. And so it's kind of interesting because your parents are now they're no longer in that environment.
Correct.
And have you guys talked about that and like how it all started or anything like that?
Yeah. So I've been out almost 20 years. My parents have been out almost 19 years. And so, yes, we are very, very open, honest, vulnerable. We've had all of those conversations. And that's the interesting part, right? Like my dad always says, when they joined, it was all about love. It was about community. It was about lifting each other up. It was about joining together forces to create a movement of positivity and love and fellowship and worship, right? Like that's what it started out as. And my parents were hippies. They were all about love and, community. And, that's what they thought they were joining. And then my dad uses the analogy all the time that eventually, slowly, just like when you put a lobster in a cold pot of water and you slowly turn up the heat, it has no idea that it's being boiled to death. And that's literally what happened with the cult, that the changes were so incremental. They were so, they just happened so succinctly and so easily. And it just suddenly, you wake up one day and you're like, how did we get here? And that was literally like how, when I came back and escaped and then had that conversation with my dad that I talk about in the book, where he's like, this is not what we signed up for. We had no idea. Like, how did we get here? Like, those are real questions that my parents had to ask and that they've had to deal with. They've had to answer for themselves. Right. So yeah, we are a very open family. I'm so grateful to have the majority of my family. As I stated in the book, I still have a sister that's still part of the cult, but I have 8 other siblings that are out and we're healthy. And I have many nieces and nephews, and I've created a relationship with extended family that have embraced me and supported me and loved me in this journey. And so without that, this whole navigation is much, much, much more difficult. And I'm not ignorant to that, right? My journey does not look like a lot of other people that have left, that don't have that support, that don't have that family bond, that may have parents still there or more siblings still there. Like, my journey is my journey, and I'm not taking away from anybody else's, because they all look very, very differently. And I'm very grateful for the family support that I have and how we've all grown together, and we really take it seriously. And it's very important to us as that we navigate together.
Yeah, definitely that community and having that supportive community, because you had community within the cult, but then it's not as supportive. Like, the people within the community may have been supported in the way that they knew how to be, because again, you all were being, led astray by this person who, and it's kind of interesting because when I think about like a cult leader, like oh my God, what's his name? Jim Jones. I can't remember the name of that cult, but I've seen, documentaries about that whole situation. And I truly don't believe that he started off thinking, I'm going to start a cult. Like, it was a progressive movements for him as well. And so not forgiving the cult leader himself, but to say that, that this type of environment is something that it kind of fosters and grows. And I think it's part of it is their narcissistic behaviors, as well as them, and I'm just speaking from my own mind, y'all. This is what I think, is that the narcissistic behaviors, as well as they now say, oh, wow, people look up to me. They revere me. I can have them do like what I want. And then to live an easier life. I don't know. That's my thought on it.
And then it becomes an addictive behavior, right? Like, they get addicted to the power. They get addicted to that ego stroke. They get addicted to that manipulating. And then it becomes divisive, and it becomes like fear-based, right? And when you said I had community within the cult, no, we did not. We weren't allowed to speak to our community. We weren't allowed to speak, period. We would get in trouble for speaking to one another, because when smart people start to talk to each other, they're going to compare notes, and they're going to be like, what? That's happening to you too? What? So we all had these isolated experiences, but we didn't have, and we worshiped together. We spent time together. We showered together, but we didn't have community. I didn't know anything about the people that I grew up with. We weren't allowed to, unless we met on the outside, right? At the grocery store or at another meeting that wasn't at the compound, like, then we might have these secret conversations, but I knew nothing. I knew, unless I saw it with my own eyes, I didn't know what they were going through on, their own abuse and trauma within the cult, unless I saw it with my own eyes. So, yeah.
Wow. Well, I guess I missed that piece there. It's, the thing that came to mind was, because you mentioned about, being revered, the ego, all this stuff. And there was something that you mentioned inside of your book that it talks about how we were like, I'll kind of paraphrase the best I can, is that we wanted him to want to use our cloth to wipe his face, because that meant that we were in favor or something kind of like that. Can you share what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, like we made him a proverbial god. Like he was a light being for us. Like he was the top of the totem pole, and so we revered and respected him in every way. So if we handed a cloth that he used and he wiped his sweat on our cloth, like we felt like, wow, he chose my cloth, like that was so special. Or if when I got to clean his boots, I got to hold his boots, I got to clean his boots, right? Like that was like special. Like not everybody got to touch him, or touch his things, right? Because of the way that we all honored and revered him. He was a godlike figure for us. It wasn't, you couldn't just go shake his hand. No, you couldn't touch him lest we taped him, right? So if you got to touch something of his, or he paid special attention to you, that felt so good. You felt special, you felt important, all of that being, again, just another way that he controlled us, another way to keep us in this space of fear. But yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Well, there are countless stories in the book. Get your copy. So we're talking about this book right now. Glory Going All In: Cult Survivor to Courageous Warrior by Martha Kartaoui. And you can get your copy at letgloryshine.com. Letgloryshine.com. Head on over there and get your copy of the book. We're going to switch gears, Martha, because we could go on for a long time about the past and what it was like in the cult, but let's talk about today, because you made that decision. How old were you the first time you escaped from that cult?
The first time I was 19.
19. And then from 19 until 25, because 25 is when you officially left, like you're like, I'm out of here, and you haven't gone back since.
Yeah.
So, during those 6 years, can you share with us just briefly what the decision making was like the final time at age 25, and what made you realize, you mentioned your sister was pregnant, you wanted to be part of that was part of the purpose, but leading up to that, well, that 6 years leading up to that final decision to leave. Yeah. Again, decision, we're talking about decisions right now. That final decision to leave, what was that like? What did that feel like to make a decision like that?
So coming back after I was brought back after the first escape, it was extremely, extremely difficult. And I talk about it in the book, how I paid big for that decision, and in a very bad and harmful way. My head was shaved for over a year and a half. Every single month, my head was shaved. All of my things were burnt. So I really paid a huge penance for that decision. So when you asked me like what was it like, I was just in survival. I was literally breathing, but I was not living by any stretch of the imagination. I did gain a little bit of purpose when he prophesied that I was going to run and manage the first cult-owned business. And I really did find some purpose in that. And I did do a really amazing job. I ran the business, and I was the face of the business for over 4 years. It was long and arduous and crazy days and nights, but because we were open 365 days a year, and it was usually 12 to 14, 16, 18-hour days. But I found purpose in that. And it removed me from having to be in the meetings where I was usually verbally assaulted or further traumatized. And so I didn't have to go to meetings anymore because I was running the business. So I had purpose for a time. And then when I finally got the information that my sister was pregnant, that gave me even further purpose, where I was like, you know what, this cannot be all there that is to life. There has got to be more to life than this life that I'm living. Right. And my sister.
But before you go there, I want to cover something, because I think that this is an important piece there, because I didn't realize this until it really got to the end of that chapter, is when you worked in the business 365 days in a row for 4 years, you didn't make a dime.
Not a penny.
it's not like you were like, people could say, oh, well, she must have been saving money because you didn't make a penny.
No, not a penny.
So yeah. So anyway, go on about your sister.
Yeah. So when I found out that she was pregnant, that gave me further purpose. And it really, and our conversations leading up to finding out she was pregnant, because I started sneaking and calling her and we started building a relationship back. She started asking hard questions. She started asking questions about whether I realized it was a cult. She started asking real questions about the abuses that I had experienced. Like, she started asking real questions. And so, yes, my brain started asking myself those questions, but it would be many years before I could really answer those questions. And the purpose that I found in order to give me the will and the courage to escape was for her. It wasn't for me. I wanted to be there for her. It would be many years before I felt worthy of loving myself enough to make a courageous decision like the one that I had made then. But I also had wonderful influences from people like Papa, like I talk about in the story, who was a guardian angel for me, who saw me for me, even in my truth, when I finally did share with him the things that were happening to me within the cult. And he was an outsider. But he will forever be the person that gave me a chance at this new life, because without him, my escape was not possible. And starting over in this way was not possible.
So many lessons here, that, just your story of even just the genesis of it, and, leading to the time you left. And then of course, many, many more lessons after. And one of those lessons that I gained from, from what you just shared right there, is the power of the people in our lives to ask us those tough questions. And then for us to, rather than ignore or run away from, or like and say, oh, I don't want to answer that question because it's tough, but instead to really look at those tough questions and say, why is this?
Yeah.
Because oftentimes people on the outside of us, they see what's going on and we don't see it because we're so, what's the saying is, like, we're too close to the forest to see the trees.
Yeah.
And that oftentimes happens. And so your sister asking you those questions, did you become defensive, or did you start to ask yourself, yeah, why is this?
At first I was very defensive because,
Mhm.
again, I knew nothing else. Right. But then it starts to ruminate. Those questions start to ruminate, and they started to ruminate in my mind. And I started to talk to Papa about them. And then, I definitely started thinking. And, we talk about planting the seeds. We talk about that a lot in our journeys. We plant the seeds. We don't know who else might water them and who else might reap the fruits of them. And that's what it was during that time. Is Papa was planting seeds, Smyrna was planting seeds. And then, eventually I would be able to become all the things that were meant for me, but it would be a process.
Yeah, that's I wrote down before you even said, questions equals seeds, because what happens in our brains, it's just an automatic thing. When we're asked a question, our brain is searching for the answer. We might not be consciously be searching for the answer, but our brain is searching for that answer. And
Yeah.
so it really was that opportunity to have those seeds planted. And, whether at that time that you were resistant to the question or felt defensive, or whatever it was, the seeds were still being planted. And that's the key there. So asking questions is really important. This is one of the lessons, is asking questions is really important. So asking others questions, but also asking ourselves questions, when we come to that point of asking ourselves. Now, one of the things that after you leaving the cult, it's been 20 years. Congratulations for making that final decision, staying out, and for, helping your other family members to be joining forces with your other family members, right? Connecting with your family that let me ask you, were you able to have conversations with them? Because you said, there was no community because we couldn't communicate.
Right.
What was communication like in your own family? They didn't know you were going through the things you were going through.
No, they didn't. Because, again, you wouldn't ever talk badly about Cult Man. Like, that was just so. the things that were happening to me, I thought I deserved, or I had somehow, like, I had done something wrong. Like, obviously I was the problem, not him, right? Like, I would never have assumed the abuse that I received or the trauma that I received was because he was a pathological egomaniac, narcissistic cult leader, right? I thought I was the problem. I had done wrong, and I had to reap the consequences of that. And that was the abuse. That was the physical abuse. That was, the emotional abuse, the spiritual abuse, right? So no, we did not talk about Cult Man in a bad light at all in those years that we were part of the cult. It would only be afterwards that we would compare notes, and we would start talking openly once we all got out and had a completely different perspective. And then you have to sit with, if we had known, would we have chose differently, right? Like, that's a question that me and my parents have had to sit with, right? Because I wanted someone to take accountability for my torture. I wanted someone to take accountability for me having to live through the things that I needed to. But they didn't know. And so therefore they couldn't have been held accountable, right? Like, yes, they were my parents, but they didn't know. And I have to believe if they had known, just like when they did finally find out, they removed themselves from that immediately, right? So at the end of the day, this is all part of my story. This is all part of my testimony. And I really, really believe that every trauma that I experienced is because once I did the healing, it was time for me to help the next person. And that's the season of life that I'm in now.
Yeah, so beautiful to get to that point. And how did you get to that point? Because going from the situation, are we talking before we got started here, is you were talking about the process.
Yes.
The process. So when you leave a situation like that, your life doesn't change that day. There's a process. First of all, you have to make a decision, a conscious awareness that I want to discover something different, or that I want to figure out who do I want to be? Who am I? There's a lot to figure out after you, especially when you leave a situation like that. Just becoming an adult and moving out of a house, even if you don't grow up in a cult, that's a challenge. It's a challenge to discover who you are. And so let's talk about the process. So once you left and you, so you're with your sister, we don't need to tell the story about you leaving and everything, because that, again, you need to go buy the book to find out that information. But it really is a fascinating story. You can get your copy of Glory, Going All In, at letgloryshine.com. So please go get your copy today, because this is an incredible story of resilience and coming out of a situation that is something that a lot of people don't experience. And how did she go from that to what she's doing today, which we're going to move into right now. But what was that process for you of getting to the point to where you are now? It's 20 years later. You're living a completely different life. You're helping others to live a completely different life, or to live a different life, to make choices. And what was the process for you of getting there?
Yeah. So I lay it out in the book, but I'll give you the acorn version of that question, right? For me, the process was hard. It was probably harder than it needed to be, again, because I had no identity. I had no perspective. I had no self-love, self-awareness, self-esteem. I didn't know where I was. So my starting point was much lower than other people's would have been if they had any of those above things, right? But I just tried to start a new life. So when I first escaped, I was like, I'm never looking back. My success is going to be my revenge. I'm never looking back. I'm never going back. I'm just going to start a new life and act like that cult life never happened. And so I did. I became very good at my job. I rose up in the ranks. I entered into corporate. Like, I made the money. I did the things, but I was miserable. I was empty, and I was becoming a shell of myself. My physical body started to take a toll. Within 5 years of being out of the cult, I was over 100 pounds overweight. I had severe migraines, PTSD, depression, anxiety, gastrointestinal issues, migraines. Like, you list it, I had the diagnosis, because my external body was literally falling apart because I was not dealing with the internal issues. And that got my attention, right? Like I bounced around the healthcare system and nobody could help me. Everyone wanted to give me a pill or wanted to give me, take another exam or MRI or whatever it was, but nothing was helping until I made the connection during a continuing education class for my massage license, because I had also become a massage therapist during this time. That the body keeps the score of all the trauma that happens in our life, like internally in a cellular level, our body keeps the score of that. And that made a mind-blowing connection to me. And I was like, I've got to go inward. I've got to heal that trauma in order to heal my body. And that was my awakening. And that was like the catalyst of saying, okay, now I've got to become my own advocate. I've got to figure out how I'm going to do this. And I'm going to tell you, there was no quick fix. It was a difficult process of navigating that, and finding the tools that helped me and finding the modalities that helped me to go inward, to heal that little girl, to heal each trauma, to sit with those things and allow those things to have been real, but also to release them. Like I had to become my own advocate. I had to become my best friend. I had to become in love with Martha Glory, and had to come to an understanding that I was worth the healing. So I say this, and now I'm a coach, right? And so I say this to my clients all the time. Like, if you're looking for a microwavable like cure, it doesn't exist when it comes to trauma healing. Like, it is a process. But because now I've gone through it, I have so many tools in my tool belt. I have so many things that have worked for me that I can now teach others. My arsenal is so full, and I'm always continuing to learn so I can continue to pass that on to somebody else.
That's so beautiful. And congratulations on discovering all of this and for wanting to shift and change and learn and grow. And because we do have to want that in order to move into that space. Congratulations for that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to switch gears a little bit and talk about, the book. So you published the book. You worked with us at Action Takers Publishing to publish this book, which I'm so grateful that you brought this to us, because it really is an incredible story. But I want you to speak to how the book has helped you, because you're a speaker, but this book has done something different for you in relation to the speaker world. So why don't you share a little bit about that?
So when you write a book, and this was unbeknownst to me when I wrote the book, to be honest, but when you write a book, you become the authority on your topic, right? So when I wrote the book, and now when I go to stages, now I have this book. I'm the authority in that area. I'm able to, it's like proof that I've done the work. It's proof that I have something tangible that others will be able to use in a positive way. And so this past week, I was in Orlando, and I was able to use my book at when I spoke and launched there. And it was incredible. I had spoken on a couple other stages prior, and it doesn't have the same effect when you say, you know what, I've shared my stories, I've shared my healing journey, and I've shared my principles of my coaching program. It's all right here. Like, I can tangibly hand it to you, and you can learn how I did this. Like, I can show you like the journey that I took, and I can save you a lot of time, right? It's tangible. And it has taken my, my confidence, right, to another level as well, because I've put something out. It's like a baby. It's like giving birth to something that has been inside me for a very, very long time, but now seeing how it's going to positively affect every person that reads it. It is just humbling. It's really, really humbling. And I'm so honored and grateful that I got to team up with you to bring this into the world.
Well, we're honored and blessed to have you have done that with us as well. I know you're going to do another book, and so we look forward to working on that one as well. So Martha, what is the final thing that you would like to share with the audience? I hate that we're out of time. I really do. Like, what's the one thing that you would love to share with the audience? Like, if let's say somebody is sitting there and maybe they're not living in a cult life, but maybe they are feeling trapped in their life. What would you say should be the first step that they should take?
Right. So trauma is isolating, right? And any kind of pain is isolating. It makes us feel alone. It makes us feel like nobody understands us. It makes us feel that it's permanent, right? Like we can't see outside of that pain or that trauma or that angst or whatever it is that we are stuck in at the moment, right? So the one thing I can offer is just taking a real inventory of what it is that you're feeling, and then realizing you're not alone. You are not alone. I have felt those things. There are many other people that have gone through things. I promise you're not alone, but you have to open your mouth. You have to share. You have to start a conversation. And then you have to know your worth. You have to know that you are worthy of healing. You are worthy of doing the work to get yourself unstuck. It is a choice to stay stuck. I know that sounds harsh. I know that sounds, but I had to make that choice for myself. I was stuck for a long time, but I made the choice. And so can you. And there's many tools out there, but you have to choose that you're worthy enough to invest in those tools in order to find your own healing.
So good. So good. Many, many nuggets of wisdom right there. Martha, I'm hoping that somebody wants to pick up your story and turn it into a movie, because it's definitely one of those made for TV movies or made for movies. Made for streaming
movies. From your
movies.
mouth to God's ears. From your mouth to God's ears. Let's do it.
Yeah, definitely. You know, who knows? The circle I'm surrounded by right now, you never know what's going to happen. So that would be amazing. Get your copy of Glory Going All In at letgloryshine.com, letgloryshine.com. Martha, again, thank you so much for being part of, Action Takers Publishing family. And we're just honored and blessed to work with you on your story, getting it out there and doing what we can to make a greater impact on the planet. That's what this is all about. So Martha, again, thanks so much. Truly appreciate you and everything you do. Keep it up. Keep up the great work. And if anybody is watching that would like to have Martha on their show, please reach out to me or reach out to letgloryshine.com and reach out to Martha and get her on your show, because her story is very impactful, and look forward to just seeing what we can do with your story. Martha, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I'm so grateful.
This opportunity came out of nowhere, but it brought so much to my life, just knowing you guys and just meeting with all the authors. But to be able to put my story out there, and just it's like one of these things where you start doing it, you can't stop. So I'm gonna be in the next book. It's just the whole process is easy. You feel support, and it's just like being #1 seller. It just feels amazing.